Right, and welcome back. Zimbabwe has marked its Independence Day on Monday. In his message to the nation, President Emmerson Mnangagwa urged his compatriots not to forget the sacrifices the country's forebears made in pursuit of a better Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe became an independent state in 1980 after a liberation war that removed the racist Rhodesian government. The deposed Rhodesian government had made black second-class citizens in their own country and motherland. For the first time, the celebrations were held in Bulawayo, the country's second-largest city. Political figures from the biggest opposition, Citizens Coalition for Change, led by Nelson Chamisa, were part of the festivities. However, despite attending the celebrations, the CCC emphasized the new gun today it's not the AK-47, but the vote. Party leader Chamisa, in his Independence Day celebration speech, said Zimbabwe should grow into what he calls a legitimate democracy. We speak more about this with journalist Tapiwa Zivira, who is on the line to us from the capital, Harare. A very good evening to you, Tapiwa, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Let's first talk about the significance of the celebrations being held in Bulawayo. Was it seen as a positive sign?
Thank you so much for having me in the program. Indeed, the celebrations being held in Bulawayo are quite a significant thing, considering that Bulawayo has always been marginalized and left out of national events. But again, for some of us, it is really a cover-up of how the government has marginalized the region in recent years and not managed to do anything to improve the region. And also, it is just a belief that maybe it is just the politics that is going on to ensure that perhaps President Mnangagwa tries to ensure that the whole nation is united. But again, when you go into the ground, you see that this is not the case.
And the fact that this is the first time that President Mnangagwa presides over the independence celebrations, I'd like to just hear from you. Obviously, the shadow of former President Mugabe loomed large over these celebrations. How has he stacked up against conversations around this day, the importance of this milestone, and where Zimbabwe finds itself in contemporary history?
I think for us to be able to understand the context of this is that we need to go back to 2017. When President Mnangagwa came into power, there was a lot of hope among many people that he would turn around the political culture, the economic management of the country, and the social situation. But what we have seen is that over the past years, from 2017 up to now, when Mnangagwa took over power, there has been more and more economic crisis. There's been more and more political repression. We've seen the environment in politics growing more and more restricted. We've also seen that Mnangagwa has moved to fast-track the enactment of laws that seem to restrict those that disagree with him. And again, going back to Bulawayo is the home of the celebrations of the independence celebrations for 2022. It is a belief that this is just a window dressing situation because, as we all know, that Machibeland has a lot of issues, including the Kukuraundi issues that has not been solved. And going to Bulawayo seems like just a window dressing, trying to, for a president who is trying to ensure that they involve everyone, but not in a sincere way.
And just with regards to that, the CCC's leader, as we mentioned, Nelson Chamisa, was saying the gun to Zimbabwe's democracy is no longer the AK-47, but it is the vote. And this is what I want to, get to, because there was much talk about how important this day is, but does it mean that the opposing parties can look beyond those differences on a day like this? Because those issues of legitimacy, especially in terms of the democratic process, still remain. They still remain a huge thorn in the side of President Emmerson Mnangagwa, the critique that he's had of the opposition and the opposition of President Mnangagwa.
Well, it is a general belief that the 2018 elections were disputed and the legitimacy issue still stands. And when the CCC said that they were going to be part of the events of the independence celebrations, yes, there was a general feeling that they are legitimizing the 2018 elections, but also considering that we're just a year from another election, continuing to delegitimize the 2018 elections can only continue to keep the nation polarized, which is why probably when the CCC said that they're going to be part of the celebrations, which they were, it is just an attempt to say that as a country, the independence celebrations are not for one political party, but for every Zimbabwean. And we cannot continue to monopolize these celebrations to have only one political party claiming to be part of the independence celebrations, especially 42 years later, when we see not as much economic development, not as much political liberties that were promised when the country was taken from the colonialists. So it is a belief that probably we would want to see an alternative political party being active in those institutions and events that have been traditionally monopolized by ZANU-PF.
I mean, there has been ongoing talk about reforms, and as you said, since the last elections, particularly in Bulawayo, where we were, and in Matabeleland itself, there were a lot of people who had hope that the entry of President Emmerson Mnangagwa meant the oppression that was seen, especially, I mean, during times such as democratic processes like voting, that would subside, that there was greater hope. But if you look at the quality of life, it has deteriorated since then. What can be done? There's been too much talk of reform and very little done in terms of bringing that about. Yeah, indeed. When President Mnangagwa came into power in 2017, he promised a lot of things. Among them, the opening up of democratic space. Among them, the improvement of the livelihoods and economic situation of Zimbabweans. We had gone for over a decade in a very bad economic situation. But unfortunately, what we have seen has been an abandonment and neglect of the social service system. We have seen an abuse of the COVID-19 regulations to clamp down on those that dissent on President Mnangagwa. We have seen a capture of the judiciary. We have seen people being abducted. We can count that from 2020 up to now. We've had quite a number of abductions happening. We have also seen a situation where the economic situation has not improved at all, and Zimbabweans are more and more poorer. And it is actually an irony that one of the banners that President Mnangagwa was putting up at his independence celebrations was no to illegal drugs, known as Toriro. That is young people who are just getting into these cheap drugs to just get by the day because they're unemployed, hopeless. So you find out that in some way it is an admittance that we have failed and we're only leading young people into drugs and everything else. So it is unfortunate that over the past 4 years, we have seen more and more repression. We've seen more and more clamp down on opposition. We've seen even much more
open declaration by political party leaders in the ruling party saying that they'll rule forever and saying that the opposition has no place. And yet our constitution is very clear that political contestation should happen peacefully and without any other political parties being restricted.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Tapiwa. Tapiwa Zivira is a journalist there in Zimbabwe, speaking to us about the Independence Day celebrations, as it were, and he speaks to us from Harare.